Here is the side-by-side comparison list from DP Review that I have a link on this page. And I just brought it up here to kind of show you a few things. This can be quite a bit of overwhelming information. But if you are in the market for a camera, you can kind of look at this and just kind of look at some possibilities or some options. So on the far left, I've got some Canons here listed. And then I've also got some Nikons in similar group, and they kind of continue over. I've got a couple of Fujis here and some Sonys as well, and even Olympus. But a lot of it has to do with categories. So let's just kind of start over here, and let's look at this Canon EOS 1100D. This is actually really a Canon Rebel, and you can see here's basically a cheaper crop sensor digital SLR by Canon. Perfectly fine for this class. And they call these compact SLRs. They're kind of on the smaller side. So the Nikon equivalent would be this D3300 here, and you can kind of see price ranges here. You can kind of see if they're selling them as a kit with a lens or not. And there's a lot of features below. So if we keep moving up, you can kind of see kind of the next range up. Usually the differences in these cheaper cameras are going to be down here under megapixels. You can kind of see the difference in megapixels, and you can kind of compare things that way. Those are going to be most of the time that you'll see where the price difference really breaks. They'll have some different bells and whistles, but that's a big deal. Sensor size tells you if it's a crop sensor or if it's a full frame. So if you see APS-C, you know that is a crop sensor camera. And then I'll go around to the right and I'll see full frame right here. So this Canon EOS 6D is a full frame camera. And you'll see that I've got Mark III 5D as well. And then I've got the Nikon D750 full frame and the Nikon D800 full frame. So there's definitely a few full frames here. Now, in the chapter on, or the module rather, on parts of a camera, we'll go into this a little bit more as to the difference between full frame and crop sensor. Just realize that crop sensor is great for anybody who's kind of a novice, new to photography. You know, you're shooting for family and friends, and really you can do a lot with it. You know, at the point of a full frame is when you're really concerned about high-end image quality, or maybe you need a body with a little bit more features. So if you're a working photographer, advertising photographer, maybe even a wedding photographer, you shoot headshots and portraits for a living, you shoot product, especially food, for a living. Those kind of things, I would definitely say go full frame if you can afford it. But if you're just taking this class and you're just wanting to have your own camera, you can be perfectly fine with crop sensors and save some money. Another thing that I'll point out here is there are some different types of cameras. So besides SLRs, I've got listed a couple of what's called mirrorless cameras. So I'm going to move to the right so I can show you some mirrorless camera options here. They're all listed on the far right. So here's a Fuji mirrorless camera, and then I've got a little bit cheaper, smaller Fuji mirrorless camera. Got the Sony Alpha A6000, which is a very popular mirrorless camera. Nikon's version, which is the V series, and the Olympus PN series as well. So these are all very fine cameras. They don't have a viewfinder that works the same way as what you would see with an SLR. Some of them have electronic viewfinders. Some of them just show the image on the back and on a screen. Even a couple of these, like this Fujifilm X Pro 2, are actually what's called a rangefinder, but it still is a little different than what we are used to as SLRs. All these work great. If you want a smaller camera, it takes a smaller bag. Maybe even the smallest ones could fit in your pocket, like this X70. You know, these are great cameras. They still have a manual aperture, manual shutter speed, ISO, still shoot camera raw. So they're perfectly fine. They're a little different. If I'm going to be a professional photographer, I probably want an SLR. The lens choices alone are a good reason. But if I want something that's going to be for vacations, that kind of thing, then you can look at some of these crop sensors. I own a Sony Alpha A6000. I like it for its small. I use it a lot when I'm photographing adventure photography, rock climbing, search and rescue. underground. I even have a water housing for it. And it's a lot cheaper to get a water housing for this size camera than an SLR. So, and it's great image quality. It's really good. The sensors in a lot of these Sonys are similar to the sensors in the Nikon crop sensors. So there's a lot of similar parts, even though they're very different in size. I'm actually looking at the more modern version of this Fuji film right here because it's even smaller. And I've been looking for a camera that I could have on the side of my harness while I'm rock climbing that would work really well. And something like this is a little unique because the lens is built in. You'll never take the lens off this camera. So that's a little different than the rest of the options that are on here. So if you only want one lens, keep it super simple. A camera like this has some great options as well. In class, we'll go through a lot of these differences here, but people typically ask me, you know, besides resolution or pixel size, what other things can I try to find to know more about with a camera? So under body type, they're telling you if it's a range finder or if it's what kind of sensor it is. You'll see it says mirrorless under these mirrorless options right here. Body material, that lets you know a few things. When it says magnesium alloy, that means it's metal. If it doesn't say anything, it's probably just plastic, so they're a little bit easier to break. And there's probably a couple more things if we scroll down just a little bit here. Most of the time they're going to be pretty similar. A big one that might be of interesting to you, to all my students, is that there's ISO here. So we have ISO and then we have kind of the range. So the higher this number here, so there's like 100 to 2000 or 250, 600 really here. So if we look at this right here, you know, the higher this range is, the better it does in low light. So when you get these higher end ones, they'll do better in interiors and low light settings, stuff like that. When they're down and they only go out to like 6400, they're not going to do as well in low light. So that's something to kind of consider when you're looking at your different camera options.